The U.S. is planning to send a $1 billion arms package to Israel, congressional sources tell the Associated Press. This after President Joe Biden paused a major shipment of bombs, citing fear over civilian casualties.
The president believes, obviously, the commitment, and we do as well, to Israel's security is ironclad, and we want to make sure that they have what they need, Israel has what they need to defend themselves against their enemies, including Hamas.
Israel issued an evacuation order earlier this month, preparing for the fighting in Rafah. In an interview with CNBC today, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pledged to continue the war until he abolishes Hamas's battalions, all while being careful.
We're evacuating the people. Up to now, 500,000 people have vacated Rafah, evacuated safely. They've got out of the fighting zones because we asked them to leave, and we're going to complete the job. They go outside of Rafah, or outside the fighting zones. They move away because that's where we asked them to move.
For more on the situation on the ground, I'm joined by Danny Glenwright. He's the president and CEO of Save the Children Canada. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
So Netanyahu says the ratio, says they're carrying out this war carefully and that the people are being evacuated safely. He also says the ratio of Hamas combatants to Gazan civilians is about 1-to-1. He says that's a pretty good ratio, and that Israel's being, unfairly criticized for what it's doing in Gaza. What do you make of those sentiments in that statement from the Prime Minister?
Well, all I can tell you is what we're hearing from our colleagues that are working in Gaza and reports from the UN. And JP, the pace and the scale of the grave violations that we're seeing against children, the killing, the maiming, the starvation, is like nothing we've ever seen before at Save the Children. And remember, we've been working on children's rights issues for more than 100 years in contexts like this. At the same time, our ability to respond, our ability to get aid in there to protect children has never been so constrained. And it's a lethal combination right now. And we are hearing from our medical staff, we're running an emergency health unit at Al Mawasi, that children have been reporting to that hospital coming from so-called designated safe zones or humanitarian zones with injuries. So these are places that the Israeli authorities are saying are safe. But I want to reiterate, as I have on the show before, there's nowhere safe in Gaza. And what we can say is that humanitarian zones that are designated by Israel as safe are not safe. And we are seeing children reporting to our clinics as recent as today from these places like Deir al-Balah, where the Israeli authorities have told them to flee.
I just want to make sure I heard you right. You're saying this is the worst you've ever seen it for kids? This is the worst that Save the Children has ever witnessed?
The scale of what we're seeing in terms of grave violations against children, as I say, killing, maiming, reports of sexual abuse, it's starvation. Right now, the World Food Program has said that 300,000 people in northern Gaza are facing a massive famine. So the situation in Gaza is catastrophic. And as was just stated here, 450,000 people have been displaced from Rafah. But there's nowhere for them to go. We're talking about a situation where there's an inability to access clean water. There's no hygiene facilities. And we've got reports coming in all week of Israeli bombardments from air, land, and sea. And this is at a time when, as we've said, there's, no aid is getting in. We haven't had aid shipments getting into Gaza since the 5th of May. So there's a huge and severe lack of fuel, and the health system is really hanging on right now by a thread. If we don't get fuel in right away, those remaining health facilities, including the one that Save the Children is operating, won't be able to operate.
You mentioned Deir al-Balah, so your teams have relocated from Rafah to Deir al-Balah. What are you hearing about them? What are you hearing from them about the conditions there in that municipality?
A story from one of our colleagues today. She's on the move for the 5th time in 7 months with her young children and her 7-year-old mother. And her 7-year-old mother is suffering from diabetes and high blood pressure, unable to access medication. And she said, it feels like we're just being killed slowly. Imagine moving your family for 5 times. She says, just as I get comfortable in a new location, I start to understand my surroundings, because most of the places they're being moved are strange places. We are moved again. And that's just from one of our colleagues. As I was saying, another story of a young girl who reported to our health unit in Al Mawasi, a 2-year-old, And her family was bombed in Deir al-Balah, where they'd been told to relocate by Israeli authorities. And she reported to our clinic with massive injuries to her face that will leave scarring forever, injuries to her torso and to her leg. And our staff there had to give her treatment without anesthetic just because there's such shortages of it. And she lost her aunt in that bombing. So this is just one story of many. Little 2-year-old Laura is the name of the girl that I just mentioned. And they've had to release her with open wounds because there are so many children coming in, and release her in a quite a dangerous context where there's no clean water, where there's no hygiene facilities. And it's bleak for children like that, but she's one of the lucky ones because at least she's able to access some kind of treatment. We're worried now about those children across the Gaza Strip in situations like that who aren't able to get to a health facility because so few of them are now operating.
You mentioned aid, and it hasn't been coming in. We know that the Rafah crossing has been closed for quite some time now, and there's also kind of sporadic operational, things are kind of sporadic at the Kerem Shalom crossing as well. What does it mean for aid and for people when it's not coming in as frequently as it should be? What are the consequences of that?
Well, it means that you have a mass famine right now. 300,000 people are struggling with famine. The entire population of the Gaza Strip is dependent on aid at this point, and the only way to get it in is through those crossings, which, as you say, have been closed since the 5th of May. Israel has not been responding positively to the commitments, the pledges it made after the 6th of April, when 7 World Central Food Kitchen staff were killed, when it said then it would be letting more aid in. That hasn't been the situation, and humanitarian agencies like Save the Children are all saying, we can't get aid to those who need it. And not only that, but of course, opening the crossings is one thing, but we need safety to be able to deliver aid. And as bombs continue to rain down on Gaza, as I say, from the land, air, and sea, we can't deliver aid safely. And we're putting our staff at risk. We're putting the lives of people trying to get aid at risk. So, we are very worried about what the situation is right now after more than 10 days with those crossings closed, because the entire population is reliant on aid. And that's everything from food to clean water to, as I say, medical supplies and fuel that keeps these few hospitals that, haven't been systematically destroyed open.
Danny, you've been calling for a ceasefire since the war started in October. It's been 7 months now, and Netanyahu is pledging to keep going until he abolishes Hamas. Are you and your teams in Gaza running out of hope at this point?
Well, certainly we have those moments. As I've shared before, we've lost our colleagues in this fighting, but right now we have to continue to push and call on member states like Canada to pressure Israel to stop its offensive in Rafah. We are calling on states like Canada to stop the shipment of arms and weapons to Israel, and we continue to call for a ceasefire. It's been 7 months, and these are 7 months where children in Gaza have been living through terror. They've been out of school for 7 months. We're seeing children reporting they're shaking, they're tremoring. Some of them are mute. There's bedwetting, massive bedwetting being reported. Those are the children who haven't been killed. We've seen more than 14,000 children killed, and we know that's an underreported number because many are missing in the rubble. We are seeing children's bodies being uncovered in the mass graves that continue to be discovered. And of course, as I said, those that can't access healthcare, none of them have been in school. And, I don't want to forget the West Bank because we're getting reports as well over the past week from the West Bank of parents keeping their children home from school because kids are being harassed and targeted and attacked and assaulted by Israeli settlers on the way to school across the West Bank. So the situation has only gotten worse. And as I say, it's unprecedented for an agency like Save the Children. We have never seen anything this bad. We have never seen this extent of grave violations against children.
All right, let's leave it there, Danny. Thank you so much. Danny Glenwright, President and CEO of Save the Children Canada. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.